Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, we've got the second of our Hughes brothers series, and quite a departure from Menace to Society last week. This week, their 2001 Jack the Ripper thriller, From Hell. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com. Subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel. Andy, what do you say we just kick it right off with some trailers, shall we?
Let's do it. So my trailer, Pete, is Carrie Pilby, which I hadn't even heard of. I know nothing about it. It hasn't gotten high reviews on IMDb from its.
You're really selling it.
Well, it opened at Toronto, and it's. I think it's going to have some more festival runs here before it'll finally get a release. But it has a really quirky vibe, and it's one of those films that, even though it may not have the highest of ratings on IMDb, it has kind of that sense of quirky characters and stuff that could work really well for me. And so it piqued my curiosity. It's the story of this girl, Carrie Pilby, who went to Harvard when she was 14 and really doesn't have a good sense of connecting with the world. You know, she sits around reading books all the time and talks to her counselor, played by Nathan Lane, and her dad, Gabriel Byrne, and is trying to figure out, you know, what to do with life. And she's they kind of get her to start meeting people and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, it's got that just quirky sense. And Belle Powley plays Carrie Pilby, and I'm not very familiar with her, but there was something about just kind of her vibe and stuff that I kind of enjoyed. And I have to say, it may not be the greatest of films, but it does have kind of that sense of kind of those quirky characters that kind of learn to kind of find themselves and connect and become a better person, all that sort of stuff. Those sorts of stories that, you know, sometimes can really work for me. So, you know, it kind of clicked with me in its quirkiness. What did you think of this one?
Well, it reads to me as the perfect sequel to Diary of a Teenage Girl, which also starred Belle Powley. It almost feels like the spiritual sequel. And so I find her adorable. I think she's just one of those entrancing actors, and really funny awkwardness comes through in her performance here that I think is quite charming. I love that she is paired with Gabriel Byrne. I think he's great, and Nathan Lane, you know, is probably not it doesn't have the most screen time as the kind of therapeutic anchor to this particular film, but I'm gonna really enjoy his non sort of outlandish performance. I can tell. I think it's going to be really fun to watch him play another good, solid, down-to-earth character, because he's been outlandish a lot.
Yes,
and he's got a beard.
Yes, he looks very serious when he has a beard.
He does.
You know, it's going to be a sweet little film.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll be something that's worth checking out. It looks like it's going to have a limited release starting March 31st, and straight to the internet a week later, April 4th. So there you go.
My film is War Machine, Andy. This is from director David Michaud. It's based on the book by Michael Hastings called The Operators, and Michaud did the adaptation himself. Stars a crazy cast: Brad Pitt, Tilda Swinton, Lakeith Stanfield, Anthony Michael Hall, Ben Kingsley, Topher Grace, Alan, he keeps calling me. He's going to keep calling me. He'll keep calling me Ruck. It looks like it's going to be pretty funny, I think, if you find humor in such things. This is the satire of America's war with Afghanistan, and Brad Pitt plays General Stanley McChrystal. So, you know, it's one of those comedic nonfiction pieces. Brad Pitt has done a couple of these. I think he's got a real knack for playing this kind of goofy character and coming after, what was it, just the Allied? Yeah, which definitely another war film that is a little bit more serious. I think this is going to give him a chance to ham it up a little bit in uniform. I thought it looked like a very funny trailer. I'm very much looking forward to it. What's the deal with his weird hand in that final clip? I don't know. What'd you think?
I missed the hand. I was too busy staring at his weird hair.
Yeah, that was weird too. Yeah. Truth.
You know, it looks like a really interesting film. I hope it's more of I'm thinking like Three Kings, like that sort of vibe, and less of The Informant or Men Who Stare at Goats sort of vibe.
Yeah, right.
You know, I
Burn After Reading.
Yeah,
kind
like,
of,
right.
It's like Burn After Reading, but in Afghanistan.
Yeah, right. So I think that you can do a lot with satire, and I think it can be a really clever way to tell stories about something like this. And I hope it works. I think that David Michaud is an incredibly interesting director. Animal Kingdom was just a really compelling film. The Rover was one that I really wanted to see. I missed. I know that he also did Hesher, which was supposed to be an interesting film that I missed. But he has a connection with some dark characters in some of the stories that he's done. And so I think there's something really compelling about that. And bringing that to a story like this that also has that comedy, I think it can be pretty strong. So I'm very curious about this one.
I am curious too, Andy. It looks like it's going to hit, internet on May 26th. So it's coming right up, right around the corner on the Netflix. So be on the lookout for that. Yeah, Netflix. God, now we see where all that money has gone.
I'm curious if Netflix is going to hit a point where they start releasing films in theaters before they go to Netflix, or are they going to just keep it only streaming? Because I've got to believe that there's a little bit of a more, like a bigger chunk of change they could probably get doing a theatrical release, but I don't know.
I think that is against their culture. I don't think that's something that Reed Hastings is going to do. I have a hard time seeing it.
You're probably right. I just, at some point, some investors are going to say, hey, you know what? We'd like a little more money out of this.
That's right. That's going to be a way for me to save my position here. Reed Hastings won't like it, but it may happen. How about that? Your observations are correct, Andy. It is indeed night.
Inspector, I know your reputation for making brilliant guesses that turn out to be right. Someone told me you claim to dream the answers.
Sometime this evening, a bagtail was murdered in George Yard.
That doesn't sound much out of the ordinary.
It was the way she was done, Inspector. It was the way that she was done that cries out for a man of your talent.
He can foresee the victims.
I saw her. I saw her face.
Your vision's about me.
Most definitely.
You know, they used to burn men like you alive.
He could sense the suspects.
It must be someone with money.
And how do you know that?
This ain't killing for profit. This is ritual.
But for an inspector in charge of the world's most infamous investigation,
He's punishing them. I want double shifts within this area.
We'll have mayhem on the streets.
I believe this was done by someone with a working knowledge of dissection.
An educated man, that's preposterous.
the last thing he expected
I want you and your friends off the streets until I can sort this thing out.
I do trust you.
was to get close to someone who would be next.
Jack the Ripper's not finished.
From Hell, Andy, 2001. This one's a horror mystery thriller, and it is from our friends, the Hughes brothers, Albert and Alan. And it looks like they took it from the good Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell. The graphic novel of the same name tells the story of one possible story of Jack the Ripper and the White Church?
Whitechapel
murders? Whitechapel. All day I've been calling it the White Castle murders, which might be a different thing involving little tiny hamburgers.
That's the darker conclusion, I guess, to,
Yeah.
to Harold and Kumar's films.
Yeah, so it doesn't tell the White Castle murders. It is, in fact, the Whitechapel murders. And it stars Johnny Depp and Heather Graham and Ian Holm and Robbie Coltrane and Ian Richardson. And oh my goodness, there are a lot of people, some of them British and some of them not. And Andy, all I can say is I hope you didn't love this movie.
Because you hated it?
Because I didn't love this movie. No, I didn't hate it. I felt like, how is it that they could take people who are actually British and make a whole cast that sounds like the freshman community theater production of Oliver Twist? Like, I not even a little bit did I buy it. Did I buy the performances? Johnny Depp was, I like Johnny Depp. But even these seasoned British dudes, Robbie Coltrane, I love Robbie Coltrane. Where was he in this movie? I didn't see it. And I found myself enormously frustrated through a lot of it. There was some really good stuff and some genuinely creepy stuff that I felt like it felt not gritty enough for the subject matter. It was a sterile portrayal of this really gruesome story, and so it was kind of tough for me to to fully invest in.
I ended up liking it a lot more than I did when I saw it the first time, which was shortly, or I guess it was when it came out in theaters back in 2001. I thought it was pretty okay back then. Certainly had problems with some of the cast, primarily Heather Graham. And that still is probably my biggest problem with the film.
I can concur.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
But for the most part, I still enjoyed it, and I'm a fan of the graphic novel. It's a really compelling read. This recent revisit actually got me to pull it off the shelf again and start rereading it. I was hoping to kind of plow through the whole thing, but that was kind of you forget how long it is. It's definitely a beefy tome when you pull that off the shelf and start going through it again.
I haven't read any of it. Can you give me just even a bit of a breakdown of how well they did the actual adaptation of it? Is it pretty close?
Well, I mean, it would be you'd have to do it as like a TV series or a mini series or something to really kind of get the whole thing. It's just so incredibly long and detailed, and it has so many characters. I mean, it's a big investment of storytelling. I don't think there was a way where they would have successfully been able to have captured it all in one film. I mean, it's like it's the same people who did Watchmen, or at least Alan Moore, right. And I mean, the director's cut of that was like 9 some hours or some insane amount of time. That still, I don't think it sounded like fully captured that particular graphic novel. This likewise would take a very long telling to really do it the way that they do it in the novel. It's a really interesting story, the way that it's told in the graphic novel, because you really, you're watching everything unfold as it's happening. So that Dr. Gull is Jack the Ripper. Kind of everything's going on. You're watching all these different people going down all these different paths as this whole story unfolds. So it kind of takes away the surprise, and it's really just kind of this character story and it's kind of this historical story looking at the Jack the Ripper and the society and everything. And there's a lot more with the Masons, and I mean, it's just very in depth and complex.
Do the characters line up? Like, it's a story of Inspector Aberline, and so it's much more of the chase between the two. And
I mean, again,
even though we know everything that happens,
it doesn't quite unfold the same. I mean, obviously the writers here took some liberties with the story to kind of Hollywoodize it a little bit and make it a little bit more the 3-act structure, and you have to have the confrontation between Aberline and Dr. Gull in the 3rd act, and he gets taken by the rotten guy from the Queen, and has to have the big carriage chase and the escape and all that, and the love story and all that sort of stuff. Really kind of felt a little like they had to find a way to squeeze it in here to make it feel like a movie, because in the film, Aberline ends up figuring it all out. And, I wish I could remember better exactly how the graphic novel ends, but I know that he ends up living. Because, I mean, Aberline, he doesn't die until the 1920s or something like that. And the graphic novel actually starts with a prologue with him when he's much older, and he's talking to an old friend on the beach, and they're talking about it. And he kind of acknowledges, they go back to his place, and he's like, this is the house that Jack built. It's like, this is I got all this money from this story and for not ever telling what happened, sort of thing. So they kind of like bought his silence. And so it's definitely a compelling read. I think it's one of those difficult things to adapt. And I think that the team here found a pretty effective way to condense it and find some of the thematic elements that the graphic novel was going for to kind of make an interesting story. The nature, Rafael Iglesias, one of the writers, talked quite a bit about kind of the sexual hypocrisy that was going on in the era, and the way that a royal person was treated for sexual misconduct versus a whore from the streets. and just the way that all of the society had so many levels of corruption. So I really enjoy all of that in this story, and I enjoy the kind of the mystery of the whole thing. But it is a really beefy story, and I can't help but, as I watched it again this time, as much as I enjoyed it, despite some of the Hollywood stuff that I didn't like, feeling like, gosh, if they really allowed this to be kind of a David Fincher Zodiac sort of 3+ hour telling of this story, could it have been better? So
there you go.
Yeah.
There are 2 points. As much as I really loved Menace to Society, I wonder if this was a story that was maybe not in the right hands of the Hughes brothers. It felt like it was trying to be something that it wasn't, and you can kind of feel it in the trailer. I mean, the trailer uses kind of a hip hop backbeat behind this story of Jack the Ripper in period London. And it just didn't fit. There were just elements that didn't quite line up and allow you to sort of invest in the period. That was a real shortcoming for me watching the film, and it kept me just sort of out of it.
But I don't think that's their fault. I mean, that's just the marketing.
No.
That's the marketing team saying, "Hey, we got to find a way to tap into the Hughes brothers audience." And this goes back to what the Hughes brothers said after Menace to Society, is that they didn't want to get pigeonholed in just making gangster films. They wanted to really kind of try a whole variety of different things. And this goes to that. And I mean, I think Ebert actually talked about how this really was kind of a street film. It's a film of people who were, in the kind of the lower echelons of society, and kind of just their lives and everything. And to that end, you're watching the life. I mean, we really spend most of our time hanging out in Whitechapel with this group of these prostitutes who happen to be kind of tied into this whole mystery. And we really get their world. And to that end, it really does feel like I can see why the Hughes brothers took this on, because it does feel like they know that world from Watts that we saw in Menace to Society. And now they're just kind of transplanting that kind of the echoes of that type of society in 1880s London, in kind of the slums there. I found that aspect very fitting for what their type of storytelling was, even if it didn't necessarily fit with kind of the hip hop aspects of what the marketing team was going for.
I don't want it to come across like I think the Hughes brothers should only have done American hip hop gangster films. Like, that's absolutely not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there is a particular kind of experience or sort of cultural resonance to a film that takes place in this period about this particular story, and I'm not sure that they were able to really align with it, at least for my view. And clearly, it worked for you. It didn't work well for me, and part of it I could absolutely go back and look at the cinematography, just the way the camera worked, the way it was shot, the way it was lit, that I didn't get that sort of grittiness. I didn't, some of the pieces that I liked a lot, which I know you're going to talk about, the dream sequences, which I thought were very cool. I could have used more of that sort of treatment to the other areas of the film to grit it up, dirty it up, mess it up. And of course, as I've already said, the performances, I think it was not well directed. It didn't have kind of as much of a British sensibility to it. It felt like Americans playing British people, even when the people were British. And that's something I think I had a hard time getting past.
It's interesting, and I'm wondering if some of that comes from the Hughes brothers, or if it comes from the way that the writers chose to write it, the screenwriters, or if it's just the way that Alan Moore really kind of puts his graphic novels together. Because if you look at kind of the graphic novel adaptations that have been made of stuff that he's been involved in, like this, Watchmen, V for Vendetta, A League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I haven't read all of those, only this and Watchmen, but they're incredibly dense, and they're definitely not your typical 3-act structure sorts of stories. And I think that it's a real challenge for filmmakers, regardless of their caliber, to adapt and tell their stories in a really effective way that makes for an actual effective film. I don't know if any of those films actually ended up being as effective as the graphic novels might have been.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and it's one of the reasons I get so nervous when I hear talk of The Killing Joke being directly adapted. I know they released a animated version of it last year. But that's another one of those pieces. I think when you look at this one, which I haven't read, but Lost Girls and Watchmen, again, they're fantastic in their form. I think Alan Moore really is, he may be best served by his native platform. I think that's a good theory.
Roger Ebert, in his review, which was a pretty positive 3 out of 4 star review. I mean, he said it's a movie. He was quoting Variety, who said that it's catering to no clear demographic, and then he goes on to say it's despite its gothic look, From Hell is not in the Hammer horror genre. Despite its Sherlockian hero, it's not a Holmes and Watson story. Despite its murders, it's not a slasher film. What I think it is a guignol about a cross-section of a thoroughly rotten society corrupted from the top down. I think that and this is kind of one of those things about the film. It's like people going into this movie to watch like a Jack the Ripper horror movie, they're not going to really get it. People going in kind of a historical drama, they're probably not going to get it. It's really hard to kind of pin this film down, and I think that's why I was probably a little not thrilled with it when I went and saw it back when it first came out. And why you might not be liking it now, and why generally it wasn't as loved, I think.
Well, I don't know about that. I had seen the film before, so I mean, it's not like a second viewing was lost me. It wasn't a film that I was remember terribly fondly, but I am generally a fan of these kinds of procedurals, and it's been so long. I thought, maybe this is one of those that my memory will be better served by seeing it again. You have to love, I think, the characters. You have to love Johnny Depp. You have to love Heather Graham, and I think that's a real challenge as sort of the leader of the prostitutes. That's a very important and weighty angle in this film. This sort of story of the prostitutes that is like a boat anchor for me. I mean, just because of, again, the way they are directed on screen. And I say that quite specifically because I actually do like Heather Graham, and we've talked about our love of some of her great performances, and in the past, I think she can do a great job. This wasn't it.
Yeah, it made me wonder if the casting directors thought, hey, she pulled off just a fantastic character in Boogie Nights a few years before this that was kind of one of those people who's kind of on the lower echelons of that particular society, working in the world of the porn industry. And I wonder if that was kind of the transition to this film. But man, she just didn't fit, especially with the other actresses that they cast as the other prostitutes, who all looked street worn and weary. And then there's this, this just ravishing beauty, Heather Graham, and just, as an Irish woman, I didn't buy her. As a prostitute, I didn't buy her. As a person living in 1888, I didn't buy her. I never bought her in this film in any way, shape, or form.
There's that sequence where she is accosted in the alley and she's pushed up against the wall by one of the thugs, and the boss man is shaking her down, right? And it is a series of very, very, very close-ups on their face. I mean, we're just talking about, eyes, cheeks, and chin, right? And it goes from him to the thug and then back to her. And her face is like porcelain. It is absolutely pristine. And that, I mean, if that isn't a jarring disconnect from the rest of the tone of the film that they're trying to create, I don't know what is. It's shockingly beautiful, just in tone and texture, and it looks nothing like the rest of the world that they've tried to set up here.
And, I get it. It's Hollywood. They're like, well, we've got to cast somebody, we're going to have this love affair between her and Johnny Depp's character. We've got to, it's got to be somebody who's going to draw a crowd. And, I understand the business side of it, but I just feel like there are times when the business side ends up creating just much bigger problems in a project. And this is one of those times. They should have found somebody else to play it. I just saw Moonlight, and Naomi Harris, who plays the mother in that film, she is such a ravishing beauty. I mean, there's a reason that she's playing Moneypenny in the James Bond films now. But they did such a great job of bringing her down and just making her look as beautiful as she was, giving her a sense of somebody who has been worn out and down from drug abuse, from poverty, and it worked so incredibly well that I completely bought her as that character in that world, no matter how beautiful she was. She felt like somebody who had the beauty but lost it because of all the life choices that she had made. If they had done that with Heather Graham and they actually kind of found a way to bring her down to that level, I would have found it easier to buy. But they didn't even try.
Yeah, they really did. They were capitalizing on who she is as when she's really polished, and that was not this film. And I can't. I mean, I was not able to let that go in terms of the thing that prevented me from really investing in the film. And to its credit, maybe it's a better movie than I was able to see. I just wasn't able to connect with it. What was the story on the rating? It was it's pretty violent, although maybe am I numb to it now? It didn't seem that violent.
They really kind of kept the Jack the Ripper killings mostly where you weren't watching them, and I really enjoyed the way that they shot them. Just right. Quick flashes of a bloody knife in light or slashes or things like that. Very kind of artfully done, and then the bodies obviously were pretty ravaged. Really
very quick shots of the bodies.
Really, exactly.
It didn't linger on the gruesomeness of it.
No, it didn't. I know there were some deleted scenes. I didn't have a chance to watch them to see exactly what was cut out, but I know there was more of one of the. We have the most bloody body that we really spend time with is our last body, as he kind of goes, as at that point, Dr. Gull kind of goes into his delusion, and he's before a whole group of students watching him, and you see the body laying out there and all that sort of stuff. But there was another murder before that who I think that they had shot a lot more stuff with that other murder, and just a lot more of the gore and everything going on with it. And I think that may be why they were kind of pushing that NC-17 rating and actually had to cut it back a little bit. So I'm curious. I need to watch those deleted scenes, though, to kind of check and see exactly what it was. But, the graphic novel is all black and white. So it kind of like Psycho avoids a lot of that blood, despite being gory and very graphic. So the film, they really love the color red, whether it's the blood red sky or the blood red, the record player, whatever it is. It's just, the most incredible reds. And so you definitely get a lot of that when you get the bloody scenes. So who knows exactly what it was, but the MPAA can be pretty careful when it comes to eviscerations and things like that.
Yeah, right. Let's do first shot, last shot.
The first shot, after we get a quote from Jack the Ripper in 1888 about birthing the 20th century, we see an extreme close-up of a match lighting a lantern. Then we kind of dissolve in and out of black as we see some detailed extreme close-ups of things inside an opium den where Aberline is chasing the dragon.
And the last shot, Aberline's dead. He has OD'd on his precious opium, and we got a close-up of his eyes with coins on them for the ferryman. Wasn't there a connection here? The same shot of the eyes happened after the initial close-up, right? In the first shot?
We do see that shot of his eyes, yes, when he's lying on the bed, yeah.
That's the sort of literal, sort of bookended connection for me, right? There's the literal connection of it's not quite the first shot, but we get the sense of where he is, and then the close-up on his eyes, where in the first shot he's really, he's present, but he's effectively dead. This is kind of his last call. He's already dead, but doesn't have the will to live. It's kind of a similar character arc to what we talked about several weeks ago now with Logan. He's already gone, but he has this one last job, and that's the feeling I get from Aberline's character in this film.
The other connection is the second victim, the second prostitute who gets killed in the street. He actually takes some coins and puts them on her eyes, and we get the same shot with her. So it's an interesting connection to tie that element in with at least one of the victims, in a way kind of making it seem like in the end, Aberline pretty much ends up kind of being a victim of Jack the Ripper himself in a different sort of way.
Sure, that's interesting. What was your sense of the mechanic of the coins for the ferryman thing? Did that make sense to you? Did it feel like something that that Aberline as a character would have brought so closely to him that he'd use it as he on the job?
I don't know. It was an interesting little tidbit, just kind of a detail that was brought into it. I was kind of hoping for a little more kind of symbolism or kind of connection to the rest of the story with it, especially in a story that involves all sorts of mythology with these masons and the Cleopatra's Needle or whatever that thing is called, and just all these different things. I just kind of got a sense that there are all these different things that people look at like that. The whole thing, coins for the ferryman, putting coins on your eyes, is just another way for these people to kind of have all these different connections to various mythos throughout society, whether it's something that they even really pay attention to anymore or not. It's just there.
Yeah, that was my sense too, that this ended up being kind of a hodgepodge of cultural elements, but ultimately that one, like you, I wanted a little bit more. I wanted to know why this particular thing was so important to him, and we didn't ever really get that.
Right.
Casting by Joyce Galley and Sally Osoba. They did land us Johnny Depp, and I gotta say, as an actor, I like Johnny Depp. I even like him in the Pirates of the Caribbean stuff. He's a funny guy. He can do funny guy. It was not funny.
This is not funny. I actually like Johnny Depp most of the time, including when he's being a Brit. I think he pulls it off really well.
Mordecai was high on your list, right?
Oh, yes.
That was a big one? Did you want to talk about that one?
You bet. Can
we do that at the same time we do Hudson Hawk?
and the Postman. Yeah. It'll be a really wacky series.
Andy?
I think it's funny that Alan Moore, his version of Frederick Aberline in the graphic novel was much gruffer, and he complained about Johnny Depp as Aberline and his character here, calling him an absinthe-swilling dandy, which I think is pretty funny. I mean, I can see that. I mean, Johnny Depp kind of can portray that. I mean, he's kind of a pirate dandy when he's in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, but he ends up pulling it off well. And I think that, I can see maybe he's just not as tough. And they did a combination of him and a different character in the graphic novel that actually had kind of the visions. So they kind of combined these two characters into this one. Aberline in the graphic novel did not have visions. So to that end, it made for an interesting character. I really enjoy the visions. I'm not 100% sure it's really effective for the story, but I still think he's an interesting character.
Yeah, I made a comment that I really liked how they were shot, and that's kind of the extent of it, because I just don't think I needed the visions for the story. Like it sort of lends this supernatural thing to it, when really I could just buy it that he's a good and very deeply troubled cop. Right? Yeah. He's an investigator that has a drug problem, and that's okay. Like that may be the end of it, because every time some other character comes to him and says, did you dream something again? We see you have the visions. Like, there was never any weight to it. It just seemed like it was kind of off the cuff. It didn't really impact his ability to do his job. And he still was able to figure out that it was Bilbo Baggins.
Yeah, I think that's the issue that I have with them is it makes for a more interesting visual tool than an effective storytelling tool. There was an element of it that worked better in the graphic novel, but again, you have a huge graphic novel to kind of detail that and go into more depth with it. So in this particular context,
to your point,
yeah.
I can absolutely see how a secondary character might have that. Right, have some sort of be sort of supernaturally affected, and make that a part of the story. I guess I could buy that. So again, back to the development of the graphic novel, that makes more sort of intuitive sense to me.
Well, what's interesting, and I suppose is at least worth kind of discussing, is that, I mean, this is a really interesting point in time in England and just in the world of detective work anyway, because I mean, in the 1880s, it's not like they had forensics. It's not like they had fingerprinting or blood tests or anything like that. It's like if they didn't have somebody who witnessed something, they really didn't have any leads, and it's like that was kind of it. And so to a certain extent, it helps the storytelling where you actually have a detective who can kind of play a little more in-depth Sherlock Holmesian sort of digging and finding things like the grapes and really kind of know how to look. Do you still really need those dreams? I don't know, but as long as the detective, I think, is still a really effective detective, more so than I suppose the average 1880s police officer would be, then I think it could have worked without it.
Was there anything that he found as a result of his visions that he couldn't have, you couldn't make the case that he would have been able to learn somehow as a result of his just being a good investigator? The grapes totally could have come up with that. The surgery, the surgical procedures, the things that he discovered on the scene, he totally could have come up with all of that stuff. This was at a point where there were students of anatomy that were studying these things. He could have figured it out. And in fact, I think he did figure it out, arguably, right? I mean, there was nothing, I think, that came as the result of these visions that couldn't have been simply attributed to being a great inspector.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I can think of, I'd have to look at it again more closely, but I think it's when he goes and ends up talking to Dr. Gull at that kind of the freak show party where they're all looking at the Elephant Man.
Right.
And he's asking him about the knife. I think the only way that he ever would have come up with the very specific look of that knife was by having seen it in a vision. I don't think there was really any clue that he would have had from any of the killings that would have said, oh, it looks like this, it's this long, it's got this little serrated area here. I think that might be the only thing I can think of where that's how he came to the clue.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'd forgotten that one. That came from a vision, but easily written around.
Very possibly, yeah.
All right, Heather Graham. She's our young bangtail.
Oh, yes.
Oi, we got to get all the pinch bricks up off the street. Oliver, come on, let's sing a song about it.
Oh, you think that this would work as a musical?
Johnny Depp's already effectively done it from the other side.
Sweeney Todd.
Sweetie.
Yeah, we already kind of talked about Heather Graham and why she doesn't work. I don't know if I have a lot more to say about her, other than the character Mary Kelly is definitely an interesting one. And the whole idea of her escaping, actually, I mean, the thing that I find so interesting about this film is that so much of it is taken from, you could call it fact. Some of it is fact. Some of it is reports at the time that might be fact. Somebody reported it, but it could be false. There were potentially a lot of false police reports involving these cases and stuff. But somebody actually had reported that something about Mary Kelly having gotten away. And so that kind of led to this whole theory that it wasn't Mary Kelly who was the last victim, but it was this potential friend of theirs or something, and that Mary Kelly fled back to Ireland. So even that, I love how that's kind of pulled from a potential option for where Mary Kelly could have ended. Interesting. I really enjoy that that the writers here, not to mention the people who I think there's Stephen Knight is somebody who had done quite a bit of research on and written some books about the Jack the Ripper killings and everything. But I just love that they actually imbue this with so much of the histories and of the details of the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. And then there's Robbie Coltrane as Sergeant Peter Godley.
You don't like him?
No, I'm such a fan of Robbie Coltrane. I really am. And somehow, he looked out of place.
I enjoyed him in here. I don't really have any issues with him other than the part felt written very much as kind of a sidekick, and I just didn't feel like there was much for it. I would have liked it to be a little bit of a beefier character.
Yeah, maybe that was my problem with it. Same thing as Ian McNeice. I really like Ian McNeice. I think he's a fantastic actor, and I feel like he was in here as sort of a vaudevillian foil. That both the doctor and the assistant, every time they are met with a body that has been somehow mutilated, are driven to convulsive vomiting and passing out. I think it was too much. I
loved that.
Really?
It was great. I mean, because he even says, I need a real doctor, not just another drunk who can't even handle it. I don't know. I guess for me, like I felt like they captured kind of the stink and the grime and everything of this world, and being in the fly-ridden coroner's lab where they're kind of going through all these bodies. I can only imagine kind of the stink and the awfulness of everything there. It's not a clean, pristine, refrigerated room like it would be today. And so I bought all of that, and I thought as darkly funny as it was, I found it pretty believable.
I find that amusing. Because here we are trying to build this gritty, dark kind of place, and when they go so far as to throw up every time they see this body, I get it if they were just a Joe off the street, but that the police were unaffected, and they presumably had seen people that had been somehow violated physically in these ways before.
Not to mention,
anyway,
I mean, to your point, I mean, Ian McNeice as the coroner had seen the first body when they're examining her. I mean, he had already kind of seen her, and so it was, he should have already been kind of used to it to a certain extent and been able to handle it a little better than he did, right? So I can see your point. I still enjoyed it, but yeah.
How about Ian Holm?
They were initially going to be casting, who was it? Who they're going to be casting? Nigel Hawthorne, I believe, as the character, but he ended up falling kind of ill, and unfortunately, his cancer had kind of taken a bad turn and had to drop out, and so Ian Holm ended up stepping in to play the part, and I think he's great as Dr. Gull. I think that there's something I don't know. I always like Ian Holm. He has great presence, and I think that he works really well as Jack the Ripper. And it's an interesting decision and an interesting turn when he's having the confrontation with Aberline, and he turns at that last moment, and his pupils have gone completely black. And like once the persona of Aberline has kind of taken him. It's a little corny. I definitely agree. But I liked it. I don't know. I took it kind of as a way almost like how Lord of the Rings did, where it's like the darkness had kind of fallen on him, and so I kind of enjoyed it. But the funny thing is about that particular character is William Gull. One of the reasons that this theory that had come around, I can't remember, in the 70s, I think this whole theory came that Gull if he didn't know who Jack the Ripper was, he was Jack the Ripper, one of those things. One of the reasons that so many people have really kind of dismissed this whole theory is that because by the time this all happened in 1888, he would have been 72 years old, and he already had fallen ill from, I think he had been hit by typhoid like 15 years before, and so was very ill and would never have been able to be running around committing all these murders, especially as effectively as he was. So, and that's kind of an odd little thing in the film because you see, Ian Holm kind of hobbling around a little bit, and then when he becomes Jack the Ripper and his eyes go all dark and stuff, he just seems totally fit as a fiddle.
Yeah, right, exactly. Strong enough to lift, women off their feet, right? I mean, that we see him do it, and it doesn't play.
Well, he has Jason Fleming to help him out.
Okay. Jason Fleming is Netley the coachman.
He's fine.
I may go as far as to say he was my favorite thing in the film because there's this bit at the end where he says, you say there are 3 more murders that you got to do, like 3 more of these women you need me to do. I don't know if I can do it anymore. And that felt like Jason Fleming, not Netley. It just felt like he was done. I mean, I'll do it, but I'm going to be phoning it in. You know what I'm saying? There are a number of victims in this thing. Obviously, many of the prostitutes are stabbed down in the streets. But there is one in particular you want to make mention?
Yeah, I mean, I think that all the actresses do great as the prostitutes, except for Heather Graham. I think they're all cast really well. Even their friend Annie, who gets kidnapped. I really enjoy all of the women. But Susan Lynch, who plays Liz Stride, kind of the lesbian prostitute, she's just an actress that I've always found really compelling in stuff that she does. And I haven't seen her in a ton of stuff, but the film that she's always stuck out in my head as the role is she's the Selkie in the fantastic film The Secret of Rowan Inish. And I don't know what it was, just I think just her presence as this woman who becomes the seal, just I don't know, it always kind of struck a chord with me. And so that's like how I perpetually remember Susan Lynch. But she's great there, and I actually really enjoyed her character in this film too.
Let's talk about getting it made a little bit. Starting with cinematography, this is Peter Deming. Now, I said you were going to talk a little bit about the dream sequences, and you probably should do it before the memory of it breaks your brain.
Yeah, I'm not. I want to try to make sense of this. I don't know if I fully understand exactly what they were doing, but it was all like an actual process. It wasn't digitally done after the fact. What it sounds like they did is they shot them using a reversal film stock, which normally you process it twice and it comes out, it's not like a negative, it comes out like a positive. My understanding of what they did is they cross-processed it, which means they only processed it halfway, and it kind of gets through the negative stage, but it still gives you kind of a positive image, but somehow it ends up being really contrasty. The green and the yellow, it kind of really emphasizes those colors and makes for a look that I found really interesting and compelling, and nowadays is probably super easy to create in the digital labs. But yeah, right. I love that this was something that they actually did in camera and in the developing of it. It made for a really fascinating look for the dream sequences.
He is, he's obviously been around a long time, since the early 80s. He's been working as DP. He did, the Evil Dead 2 was one of his very early pieces. He's done some of the Scream movies. He's Joe's Apartment. That was a bananas movie. Did you ever see that one? It was a John Payson film with Jerry O'Connell and the cockroaches.
I only saw the trailer, but I know the film.
Bananas. He's behind that. He also worked with David Lynch, and in fact, he's DP on the first 18 episodes of the Twin Peaks revival coming in, I guess, May, I think. We've talked about him on the show. I'm not sure if it's more than once. We did talk about him during our film board episode on Oz the Great and Powerful.
And Now You See Me Too.
Oh, yes, Now You See Me Too, where where we had unmixed feelings about the film, Oz the Great and Powerful in particular. But I think the cinematography we actually quite liked.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, that was a beautiful film. It was just a terrible film.
Yeah. Beautiful and terrible. This one, maybe this is why I had a challenge with this film, is that I felt like it just wasn't gritty enough. As much work as they put into the dream sequences, I wish they maybe would have put a little bit more thought into the actual tone of the visual tone of the streets. You know, when we're walking down the street and everybody that you see is either peeing in the street corner or having sex in an alley, there is a certain visual style that I kind of want, and I didn't connect those. There was cognitive dissonance, or visual dissonance between those things, and I feel like that was a challenge to my eye.
That's interesting, because I actually liked the way that they shot all of that. I felt it actually helped emphasize kind of the griminess and the grittiness of all of it. So it worked really well for me to that end.
But it didn't give you that sense of, and another piece just in terms of blocking, it felt like there were always so many people on screen. It didn't give you this sense of kind of loneliness in the visual approach to the film. Like, I always felt like I was walking through a backlot, just kind of a clean but not very well lit backlot. And that it just looked kind of fake. I didn't get that. I mean, you already brought up Zodiac, and I feel like the visual style of Zodiac actually aligns very, very well with the tone of the film. And this is a film where that doesn't work as well for me. That's all.
It's just so funny that you say that, because I don't know. I felt it looked great. I love the production design, the costume design, the locations that they chose over in Prague, I believe, was where they filmed all of this. I mean, they talk about how, they had all these horses in the carts and everything, and they were just crapping all over the streets, and they didn't wash any of it out. The streets were just covered in just horse manure, and they just kind of kept it that way to kind of give it the gritty feel, and as stinky as it was. And yeah, I don't know, I felt it was all there on screen, and I really enjoyed the complete look of all of that. Not to mention the stunning shots of the beautiful vistas that we'd have of the city with the blood red sunsets, or really creative shots of getting the camera. I mean, I think one of my favorite shots was as Dr. Gull is coming out of his house for his last round of killing, and he's coming down his stairs, and then his carriage steps kind of drop down right in front of right over our head as he climbs up into the carriage. I found there was just a lot of really interesting and creative camera work paired with, for me, I thought a really effectively built world. But I guess
I do want.
I guess you didn't.
I do
feel
want those
that
stairs.
way.
No, I didn't feel that way. I do. I do want those stairs. Like, everywhere I go, I want the chunk, 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 the satisfying chunk of stairs to come down before me. if I ever have a house or an office that needs stairs, they're going to be controlled by that big metal machine. That's fantastic.
That would be awesome.
Well, so there you go. Production design, Martin Childs. Hair and makeup, Jerry Farkas. And costumes, Kim Barrett. For you, it worked. The costumes and makeup, with the exception of Heather Graham, I think worked very well. Anybody else you want to talk before we jump to Trevor Jones?
No, just Trevor Jones.
Trevor Jones did the music.
I like Trevor Jones. He's done some great stuff. Dark City. And actually, we didn't even mention Ian Richardson as Sir Charles Warren, the police, lieutenant above Aberlane. I loved him in this film, and I just thought of him with Trevor Jones because Trevor Jones did the music for Dark City, and good old Ian Richardson is in that fantastic film.
Yeah, he's Mr. Book, right?
He's one of those fantastic actors. I mean, he'd been in the original House of Cards, and he was in Brazil. And I mean, just really a compelling actor. But Trevor Jones's music had a fantastic gothic feel to it, and I think it worked well for this world. I really enjoyed all of it. The only thing I didn't enjoy was the Marilyn Manson song during the end credits. But the rest of it, I really enjoyed the music.
Yeah, I did too. The only thing my only comment about the music that I found frustrating. There were a number of sequences that were like two shots or two sequences where two characters are talking back and forth across a desk or an operating theater where there was no music at all. And it felt like the way they were speaking to one another, they were all wait lines, right? They were all like, we're going to need some emotional build, but there was no music. And so you'd have this, like Johnny Depp would deliver this line that sort of demands kind of an emotional, bassy undertone of environmental music. And there was nothing. And it felt a little bit comical. So the sequences between him and Ian Holm, I think the first two meetings, I think it's either the first one or the first two, there's no music at all. And I found it really lonely. Like I wanted to sing along to help them.
And did you?
Well, maybe in my head a little bit I did.
It's interesting. The Hughes brothers, this was their third feature film that wasn't a documentary. They did Menace to Society, Dead Presidents, and then after their documentary American Pimp, they ended up making this film. I think to a certain extent, they were still very young filmmakers. And I think, they were still, we talked about their influences, especially Scorsese last time. I think they were still pulling from a lot of their influences and still really, to a large extent, trying to find exactly who they were as filmmakers. And so I think some of those conversations about, should we put music here or is this fine without it? Maybe because they were still like, I don't know. And I think that's an interesting glimpse into this pair of filmmakers. And also, I think, we talked about how these guys had really kind of struggled with, well, I don't know if we actually talked about it much, but they struggled with Hollywood. And I know we talked about kind of their PR and how they kind of had to get schooled a little bit on how to kind of handle the press and not be so hateful toward, saying some nasty things about people in Hollywood and stuff. But I think they really ended up having kind of a hard time with the type of storytelling Hollywood was wanting them to tell. And so it's going to be curious. It'll be interesting to see kind of how their career evolves from this point forward. And after Book of Eli, just kind of seeing where the two of them end up going from here.
Now, I know at this point you have a list of all of the Jack the Ripper movies to review in terms of sequels and remakes. I'd like you to do them all.
Every single one of them.
Every Jack the Ripper movie.
It's funny. I don't actually have many of them, but there was a book, I believe, called The Ripper File that was kind of made into a film, Murder by Decree, directed by Bob Clark, who we've talked about with Black Christmas. This is the story of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson as they try to kind of solve the Jack the Ripper killings, which is always kind of interesting. But it's influenced by Stephen Knight's book, Jack the Ripper, The Final Solution. That's the book that really kind of had this whole Masonic plot and all the stuff with the royals and everything brought in. So that's one of the movies that was drawn from Jack the Ripper. I'm sure there are more. I didn't really actually do any research on the rest of them.
The only one to really watch is Time After Time.
Is that the only one to watch? And they're doing a new remake of that, a new TV series from that.
I think so. They are. Yeah, I haven't heard much about it.
With like it's like a sexy Sherlock Holmes and a sexy Jack the Ripper, and he's trying to stop him as he's killing in modern New York.
Yeah, right. It's the only story left to tell is to make it a sexy Sherlock Holmes. It's the only Sherlock Holmes story left is sex it up.
Right. It's like 50 Shades of Grey.
That's right. How to do it award season.
Well, this wasn't exactly an Oscar film. Most of the awards that it did get nominated for were kind of just the genre awards. Like it got 3 Saturn Award nominations for Best Horror Film, Best Actor, Best Costumes. It was nominated for Best Screenplay at the Bram Stoker Awards. The International Horror Guild nominated it for Best Movie. It's that sort of movie. And then, the Hughes brothers, with the Black Reel Awards, they got nominated for Best Director for Theatrical and Best Film. But in both cases, the movie ended up losing to Training Day. But, it's an interesting film that just, I don't know if it was one that really captured its audiences.
That's okay. They got Denzel later.
Yes, they did.
Yes, they did. How'd it do in the box office?
Well, Albert and Allen had a much bigger budget to play with for this film than their last several. This was $35 million for the budget, or $47.6 in today's dollars. The movie was released October 19th, 2001, opposite The Last Castle and Riding in Cars with Boys, where it opened at number 1 that weekend. But the movie didn't have a strong buzz and did have a bit of a challenge as a gory film shortly after September the 11th, unfortunately. Did find itself falling pretty quickly from number 1 to number 3 and then to number 7, and finally out of the weekly top 10 by its 4th week of release. Domestically, the film made $31.6 million, or about $43 million adjusted. Overseas, it did better, earning almost $43 million, or $58.4 million adjusted. So it did make its money back with an adjusted gross of about $101.4 million and adjusted profit per finished minute of $441,000. I'd say it's a pretty solid place to be for this comic book adaptation.
When did Johnny Depp start losing his the shininess of the Johnny Depp draw? Because this one, I mean, you see that, it opens at number 1. It opens at number 1 because of Johnny Depp, right? Arguably.
Yeah, I think so.
It's a horribly violent movie about Jack the Ripper. It's not going to open with just anybody.
I think he was still in a place where he wasn't like a complete box office draw. He was still kind of, Hollywood still considered him kind of a dark actor. Like he makes a lot of choices for projects that are, something he wants to do. It's not necessarily going to be something that that is a big hit. I mean, he had Sleepy Hollow and The Astronaut's Wife in 1999, but he also had
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Well, he had The Ninth Gate in 1999.
Yeah.
Not a big hit for Roman Polanski. In 2000, he had The Man Who Cried, which is, I think, kind of a bomb. He had a bit part in Before Night Falls. He had Chocolat, the Oscar nominee.
Yeah,
he was in
that's
that.
Right.
But then the next year he does Blow, kind of the story about the guy who started the drug empire. Same year he did this movie. And it wasn't until 2003 that he really, that's when Pirates of the Caribbean hit, and that kind of turned him into something huge again, where I think he really started taking off there. So I think he was at a place, he was very popular, but I don't think he was complete box office draw until after this.
I was wondering, because at the time when they would have been, I don't know, maybe thinking about this, watching things that he had done, wouldn't they have been looking at things like Donnie Brasco, which I thought he was great in Donnie Brasco.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a moneymaker, though. Nick of Time, I don't think was a moneymaker.
Ed Wood, What's Eating Gilbert Grape?
A random thing that I learned about Johnny Depp and his movies is that, remember the movie The Tourist that he did? That was such a huge, kind of a domestic flop. It ended up making a ton of money. And I never realized that because it was received so poorly. But yes, that movie is one of his most commercially successful films, grossing $278 million worldwide.
Wow.
Yeah.
What about old Don Juan DeMarco? Remember him in that when Faye Dunaway got her groove back?
I love that movie. It's a great movie.
Right?
Yes.
Remember his chest? Man, that poster it doesn't really tell the story of the work. Looking at it right now, it's full romance novel, which I guess is fine, but I thought he was great in that movie. That was such a funny character.
It is. That was a very nice little small film. I enjoyed that quite a bit.
It was. Anyway, so these are all things that make the case for Johnny Depp being somebody that people are interested in seeing. And so I still think that there is something to that. Shall we flick chart it?
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel, and you can just slide over to your show notes there on your podcast app of choice, and you can tap on the flick chart, the word flick chart. It will take you right to this film in your flick chart account. And you can add it to your list, and let's see how it ranks once we dig in here.
We have From Hell or Joe versus the Volcano.
Joe versus the Volcano.
Joe versus the Volcano, absolutely.
That's a no contest.
All right, From Hell or The Host, little Bong Joon-ho. From Hell for me.
I think I'm The Host. I think that's predictably The Host. I really liked that movie. It's kind of easy to beat The Host for me, but this one doesn't quite do it. Let's go to the mat.
Okay. One,
two,
two,
three.
Scissors.
Rock. All right. There you go.
All right. Next up, we have From Hell or our last listener's choice, The Emigrants.
Oh, From Hell.
From Hell. I'm close actually to saying The Emigrants here, but I'm going to say From Hell.
I am not close.
From Hell or The Untouchables.
The Untouchables.
Yeah, I had some story problems with The Untouchables, but I would still pick that one. From Hell or Defending Your Life. From Hell for me.
Aww.
Meryl Streep, she's such
Go ahead, she's listening.
Overrated actress.
She went back for the cat, Andy. I'll give you From Hell.
Alrighty. From Hell or The Magnificent Seven 2016 version. I'm saying From Hell.
Okay. From Hell.
From Hell or Metropolis.
I'm going to guess you're going to say Metropolis.
I am.
Yeah, I think I am too.
Yeah, I'm kind of either way on this one, but Metropolis, I think there's just a lot of compelling stuff there. From Hell or The Little Foxes. I'm definitely From Hell.
Definitely From Hell.
Okay, well, that puts it at 242 on our flick chart. 242 out of 294.
See, that feels okay for me. I imagine you're feeling just a little bit stung.
No, I'm not. I as much as I enjoy the film, the problems that I have are big ones, but I still really enjoy the film, but I'm okay with the spot that it landed at on the chart.
Well done, Andy.
So there you go.
Yeah, no, I like it. How's this? What is this for your Letterboxd? 3.5 stars of Andy Love, 3.5.
Believe it or not, it's 4 stars.
What?
I know.
4 stars?
I really liked the film this time. Like I found it so compelling and so fascinating. I was really surprised that I enjoyed it as much as I did. If only it wasn't for Heather Graham and the parts with her, I might have even gone higher. But yeah, 4 stars straight up for me.
Well, I was coming in right at 2.5. I feel like I need to restrain you, but probably not that much. I'm gonna give it 3 stars. Just so I can sort of meter your exuberance just a hair.
And it's probably a good thing.
Okay, so there we go. This was number 2 in our Hughes Brothers. We've already teased it. We are doing Book of Eli next week.
Yes, we are. Very much looking forward to seeing that.
When's the last time you've seen that?
In the theater. Last time I saw it was when it was in the theater. So I'm looking forward to checking this one out again. I remember enjoying it quite a bit. Not loving it, but enjoying it quite a bit. And so now I'm curious to kind of revisit it.
I remember really enjoying my experience with Book of Eli. I thought it was a really great movie. And I have a hard time remembering anything beyond Denzel.
Yeah.
Like it'd be tough for me to tell you what it really was about.
Yeah,
I got some nuggets.
I have a vague idea, but I'm kind of in the same place.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to it. That is next week. Until then, I gotta go to bed.
All right. Well, I am gonna go down to the opium den and chase the dragon.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
Melissa saw this film on January 4th, 2014, and I think she was in the same high school theater that I was. She says, super jank. I don't know what that means, Andy. Is that a millennial thing?
Must be.
We're in the wrong business. She says, super jank. Johnny Depp is cute, and so is Heather Graham, but it's hard to even know what they're talking about the whole time. That's a 1 star. I agree.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I've got a 1 star by Marilyn A. Campbell, who says, if only Jack could have ripped this up. This film takes the easy way out and uses the theory of government conspiracy covering up royal guilt. That aside, Heather Graham's must have missed her makeup call, what with her pearly white teeth and barely dirtied hair and clothes. Johnny Depp is incomprehensible as he mumbles along and occasionally attempts an accent. Several good character actors are underused. It's a boring mess. So
These are good. The real victim here is Alan Moore's wonderful comic book, which has been savaged, raped, butchered, and emasculated out in the streets. Oh, man. That's one thing we didn't actually talk about, that Moore actually had his name yanked from it. And I'm not sure I know the backstory enough on that, but we talk about it as the source material here, but it's not anywhere on the poster. Not like on Watchmen, his name was on it.
Oh,
right?
Interesting. I didn't. I don't think I knew that.
Clearly, I don't know enough about it. Thanks, Amazon. It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, I know, you're telling me. Producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
In Season 6, our Disease Films series had adaptations like The Omega Man, based on I Am Legend, The Andromeda Strain, Children of Men, and Blindness.
I Am Legend is so much better than The Omega Man.
What about the Will Smith version?
Don't get me started.
For our This Is Real Life Jack series, we talked Black Hawk Down and Seabiscuit, some great true stories based on fantastic books.
And we had more listeners' choices like The Fly, The Emigrants, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
You just did a series on The Fly on the Sitting in the Dark podcast. Did you read the original material?
Wasn't watching every Fly movie enough?
Our Big Betty Davis series featured adaptations like The Little Foxes, Now Voyager, All About Eve, and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Are you calling Betty Davis big?
Only in personality and force.
She is a force to be reckoned with.
We talked about the entire The Godfather trilogy, of course. Iconic page to screen, even if it is just the one Mario Puzo book. I wonder if Coppola will ever make The Sicilian.
We also had some Zhang Yimou adaptations with Judo and Raise the Red Lantern. Absolutely gorgeous movies.
And don't forget the Hughes Brothers series with From Hell, based on the graphic novel. Brilliant material.
Kelly Reichardt gave us Wendy and Lucy and Certain Women, adapted from short stories.
Plus more Hayao Miyazaki as we tackled Howl's Moving Castle.
Find all these books and more at thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports the show.
Get the full list of adapted films that we've covered at thenextreel.com/originals and start your next read today.